Hello and welcome back to this series of videos on corpus linguistics. In today's video we'll talk about types of corpora. Now, perhaps you're more interested in actually analyzing a corpus and using the different tools, software and everything. Well, I promise you that in the next video we'll do that exactly, okay? We'll create our first corpus and we'll analyze it together using software, the tools, the whole layout. Now, the reason why I chose to talk about types of corpora in this video is because I believe it is important to know what types of corpora exist so that you can make an informed decision on the type of corpus design to go for whatever your research purposes is. So that if you want to create your own corpus, or if you want to choose an already available corpus, then you would know what type of corpus design to go for, okay? So with this being said, let me just tell you that the material for this presentation is mostly based on these two references, the Routledge Handbook of Corpus Linguistics and Developing Linguistic Corpora, a guide to good practice. They're really informative books and I really suggest that you read at least one of them. Okay, so now I'll give you a list of types of corpora, and this list is by no means exhaustive, okay? So these are not all the types of corpora that exist, but these are the most common and most frequent ones, okay? So the first type of corpora are spoken corpora and written corpora, and these are basically self-explanatory, right? So the first type of corpora basically contain oral productions, and the second type of corpora contain written texts. Okay, no sweat. The second type of corpora are sample corpora, and we'll see what sample corpora are. Then we talk about corpora for comparisons. Then general corpora versus specialized corpora. We'll talk about annotated corpora versus annotated corpora, and I think that you'll find these ones quite interesting. I personally do. And finally, we'll talk about native speaker corpora versus learner corpora. And again, these are self-explanatory types of corpora. But the question to answer here is, who are the learners when we talk about learner corpora? Okay? So let's discuss the first type of corpora, sample corpora. Now, these are fairly easy to understand. Just think of them as snapshots of a given language at a specific point in time. So I'm sure you already know what snapshots are. Now, sample corpora are a bit similar. So they present how one language is used in a very specific point in time. So say that this is our timeline, and say that somebody has created or compiled a sample corpus back in 2010. So that corpus will reflect how the language was used in 2010 and 2010 only. If, for instance, you would like to compile a corpus this year, then that corpus will reflect how the language is used in 2020. Now, one of the characteristics of how language is used today versus how it was used in previous years is that, well, in today's corpora, you will find words such as coronavirus, pandemic, social distancing, outbreak, etc. You'll find that these words are highly frequent in comparison with corpora from previous years. Now, I don't know how the linguistic situation will be in the year 2030. Perhaps those of you who have a time machine can go there and create a sample corpus and go back and inform us. No? That is not what time machines are for? Okay, moving on. So the primary aim of a sample corpus is to present a state of a language with the time dimension frozen. So this is the key term here. Now, let us have a look at an example of a sample corpus. Now, the first sample corpus to ever be created is the Brown corpus. Now, this is a corpus of American English. And take a second here, pause the video if you like, and try to guess, when was this corpus created? Was it in, for instance, the 70s, the 80s, perhaps the year 2000? Try to guess. And I will continue the video in 3, 2, and 1. So the Brown corpus was actually compiled in the 60s, and more specifically 63 and 64. So people have been doing this for quite some time, right? Maybe not such a long time. Anyway, so the Brown corpus is made of approximately 1 million words, and the texts of the corpus were originally written in 1961. So They're not really old, but yeah, perhaps you can compare how language is used today versus how it was used back then and see if there are some similarities and some differences. Okay, moving on. So the next type of corpora are corpora which are created for the sole purpose of making comparisons. Now, please keep in mind, in order to compare two or more corpora, they need to share the same design characteristics. Okay, and this is crucial. And secondly, and this is ideal, they need to be of the same size. So if one corpus is of 2 million words, then the other one should also contain 2 million words. Now, as I said, this is ideal, and in reality, it's not always the case. So it's not always that you come across two identical corpora in terms of size. So that is why there are some statistical measures that allow you to normalize the data and make comparisons even though the corpora are not of the same size. But nevertheless, in order to compare two corpora, they need to share the same design characteristics. Okay? Now, the first type of corpora which are created for comparison are geographical corpora. So this type of corpora compare how one language is different in two different geographical locations. So for instance, you may be interested in seeing how Spanish is used in Spain versus in Argentina. Another type of corpora for comparison are historical corpora. So again, you would like to see how one language changes over time. And finally, there are contrastive corpora for comparison, and this type of corpora are basically created in order to be contrasted with themselves. So this type of corpora contain different language varieties so that you can see and make discoveries, right? So yeah, let's talk more about geographical corpora. Now, the first corpus to ever be created in order to make a geographical comparison is actually the Loeb corpus, the Lancaster, Oslo, Bergen corpus. Now, this is a corpus of British English, and it was compiled with the sole purpose of making it comparable with the Brown corpus, the one of American English that we have just talked about. Now remember, since the Loeb corpus was created in order to be comparable with the Brown corpus, then the Loeb corpus was given the same design as the Brown corpus, and all the texts in both corpora were printed during the same year, which was 1961. So this will allow for the comparison to be as accurate as possible, right? Okay, now let's talk about historical corpora for comparison. Now, there are two types here. There are diachronic corpora and monitor corpora. Now, diachronic corpora are again fairly easy to understand. They basically present snapshots at intervals of time, usually spanning at least a generation. So, in diachronic corpora, you compare how one language changes cross generations, and the interval is generally of 30 years or so. So you can compile a corpus, wait 30 years, compile another one, and see how the language changes across generations. Monitor corpora are a bit different. So they were originally put forward by Sinclair in 82, and they are devised so that language change can be plotted as it occurs. So in this type of corpora, you never stop collecting the data, so that whenever language change happens, you can see exactly when and how it happened. So the first ones, you wait for a generation to pass in order to compile the next corpus. The second one, you never really stop collecting the data. And both of them are really interesting. Okay, moving on. Let's give an example. So an example of a historical corpus, again, the first corpus to be created in order to make historical comparisons, is a diachronic one, and it is named the Helsinki Corpus. Now, for those of you who are fans of La Casa de Papel, no, we're not talking about this Helsinki. Rather, we're talking about the corpus that was created in the University of Helsinki. So, as you can see, the corpus is made of approximately 1.5 million words. The language is English, and it differs from Old to Early Modern English. And what is of interest to us here is the period. So, the texts that make the corpus date way back to the years 730 and 1710. So it will be interesting to compare how the English used today differs from the English that was used back then. Just giving you ideas, right? Okay. Now let's talk about general corpora. Now, these are really, really very famous and they're very common. So General corpora are basically corpora that consist of texts that do not belong to a single text type, subject field, register, domain, genre, etc. So general corpora basically reflects how language is used generally across different subject fields, different registers, and different contexts. So in this type of corpora, you would like to collect informal conversations, formal conversations. You'd like to collect academic writings, newspaper articles, journals, novels, etc. So the most famous, I believe, uh, general corpus that exists is the British National Corpus. Now, as we have already said, the British National Corpus is a general corpus that is made of more than 100 million words, and the texts that make the British National Corpus are collected from different genres, different domains, different subject fields, etc. Okay, now specialized corpora are different. Now, specialized corpora contain texts that are specific to one or more subject areas, domains, topics, etc. So, for instance, if you'd like to investigate certain linguistic phenomena in academic writings, then you collect only academic writings. So in this case, you will have a specialized corpus, because the language that is used in academic writings obviously differs from the language that is used in everyday conversation, in informal conversations, etc. Okay, so these are specialized corpora. Now, yeah, we'll talk about annotated corpora, which I find to be extremely interesting. And if you have never heard of annotated corpora, I think that this will blow your mind. Okay, at least it did with me. Anyway, so corpus annotation is the practice of adding interpretive linguistic information to a corpus. So we know that a corpus is basically a text, right, or a collection of texts. And it's more than that, but basically it's a collection of texts. Now, the text by itself doesn't contain any interpretive linguistic information. So if you want to add, or to make it more informative, you may want to add phonological annotations. That is, it will give you information of how certain words are pronounced, yeah, how certain phrases are pronounced, etc. You may add syntactic annotation, semantic annotation, discourse annotation, etc. So you add interpretive linguistic information to the corpus. And one of the most famous types of annotation are post-tagging, or part of speech tagging. So the interpretive linguistic information in this context is part of speech. So you tag the corpus for part of speech. Now, how does this happen? How can we do that? Well, it looks something like this. You have a word, and to each word you assign a certain post tag. So for instance, the word mother is assigned the post tag in N1, which means singular common noun. The word throw is tagged with the tag VVB, which means base form of lexical verb. And anonymous is tagged with JJ, which means general adjective. Now, why would we do that? Why would we bother ourselves making such complex types of corpora? Well, as you know, the computer or the software doesn't really know what mother is. It doesn't really know the part of speech of the word mother or the word throw, or basically any word. It only recognizes characters or codes. So adding parts of speech tags will allow you to, for example, if you're interested in seeing what are the most frequent nouns in the corpus, then you can simply type in the tag NN1 and you'll have a list of the most frequent singular common nouns in the corpus. If you're interested in seeing how, for instance, all verbs behave in the corpus, then you can simply type in the tag for verbs and the software will give you the verbs that are included in the corpus. Okay, now a tagged or an annotated corpus looks something like this. Now, at first glance, this might seem scary, it might seem shocking. You might be saying, what the hell is this, man? How can I read this? How can I interpret this? I mean, this is rubbish. But it's really not, and it's really easy to understand. So let us read the first two sentences, or the first two lines. So let's zoom in a little bit. Yeah. So as you can see, the text reads, on April the 25th, 1860, an anonymous author submitted the following review of George Eliot's The Mill on the Floss, etc. So as you can see, each word is assigned a post tag. So the word on is assigned a post tag in, April is assigned a post tag NP, the is tagged with DT, etc. Now, each word is tagged for its part of speech. So on is tagged with the preposition part of speech that is in. So in stands for preposition. The word April is tagged with NP, that stands for proper noun. The is tagged with DT, which stands for determiner, etc. Okay, so now this would give an extra value to the corpus, and it will make the corpus analysis, in case you are interested in parts of speech, easier. Now, at this point, you might be wondering, how the hell can I do this? How can I tag the whole text? It seems like a lot of work, and I know we are all busy, right? And we are all lazy. We don't want to do all of this. And second of all, how can I remember all of this? I mean, NP, DT, NN, what else? CD, JJ, VVG. I mean, come on, man, this is too much. Well, concerning the first question, you don't have to tag the text manually. There are some software that do this for you, although they're not 100% accurate, so certain manual checking is necessary, but they are fairly accurate, at least for English. I don't know about other languages. And for the second question, you don't really have to remember all of this. There is all of these post tags. They are available online, so you can check them by yourself. As always, I'll leave the link in the description down below. And but yeah, with practice, you eventually will remember these post tags. Okay, so it's not really something extraordinary. But yeah, I think it's really interesting, and it will serve your research purposes if, again, you're interested in parts of speech. Now, on the other hand, we have unannotated corpora. And these are basically the opposites of what we have just seen. These are simply pure corpora, okay? Just pure text with no information, no annotation, nothing. Now, there are some corpus linguists who prefer the corpora to be pure, no pun intended. And there are some corpus linguists who prefer the corpora to be annotated. Now, there isn't really a right or wrong answer here. It's basically a matter of preference. Each of them has their own arguments. And the more you practice, the more you'll see with each end of the spectrum you'll fit, right? Okay, moving on. Now, the last type of corpus that we'll talk about is non-native speaker corpora. Okay, now this is basically self-explanatory, but what we need to answer here is, who are the learners when we talk about learner corpora? So learners, learners are speakers who learn a language which is neither their first language nor an institutionalized additional language in the country where they live. Okay, now this is according to Granger. I'll give you an example. Here in Morocco, our first language is Darija or Moroccan Arabic, or it could be Berber, or sometimes both. And the additional institutionalized language is French. So in our context, if somebody compiles a corpus of Moroccan English speakers, then in that case, that would be a learner corpus. Okay, provided that English is not the mother tongue of these speakers, right? Now, the challenge here is, since the language is not really spoken in the country, then how can you collect the data? How can you make people use the language naturally if the language is not even spoken in everyday interactions and normal conversations? In other hands, how can you strive for authenticity if the language is not even spoken? Well, the best way to do that is through open-ended types of tasks. So you give your informants the freedom to choose whatever words they want, whatever syntactic structures, etc. So that you can strive for authenticity. Now here you might stop me and tell me, whoa, wait. Whatever topic I give them, they will be bound to use the vocabulary that goes with that topic. And so even though I gave them the freedom to choose whatever words they want, whatever syntactic structures, etc., they are still restricted by the vocabulary that goes with that topic. And to this I'll tell you, yeah, you're right, absolutely right. And perhaps your corpus will not really be representative of your informant's linguistic competence. And yeah, this is a really fair question or observation. Well, what I can tell you is that this is an opportunity for you, the researcher, to be creative and to think of ways to make your informants exploit their linguistic repertoire to the fullest. Okay, so I know that you have some creativity in you, and if you ever want to compile a little corpus, you can do it, and I know that you will do it. Okay, so this will bring us to the end of the video, or brings us to the end of the video. As always, some additional material for your own reading, in case you want to learn more about types of corpora, etc. And yeah, if you have any questions, any comments, any remarks, please feel free to leave them in the comment section down below, or you can email me. I'll leave my email in the description. And yeah, I hope that you've enjoyed the video. I hope that you have learned something new today. And as always, see you in the next video. Bye bye. Ciao, ciao.